And now we're in Hovia with Greg Crowe. Greg, can you tell us a little bit about what you do here?
Yes, I make a range of stoneware pots, mostly useful pots, casseroles, jugs, teapots, mugs, bowls, lots of bowls. And I also concentrate on exploring the outside texture that I can get by stretching the clay when I throw it. And that's my sort of little specialisation, little area that I'm particularly interested in.
Yeah.
And then all the pots are fired in a wood kiln, this is a wood kiln here. Most of the potters use gas or electric kilns, and I fire with wood. So the pots are brought up to temperature totally fired with wood.
And did you make this kiln?
Yes. It's showing its age now, but it's about 26 years old.
Yeah.
I built it with another potter that was in Perth at the time. We built it together.
Yeah.
And I fire it, generally I try and fire it twice a year. It's quite a large kiln, so it holds a lot of pots.
So where do you get all of your clay for these pots?
It's a variety of clays. I like making my own clay, so I have a dough mixer, which is a large bowl that can mix about 300 kilos of clay at a time. I have a pug mill, a big auger that mixes the clay. Okay. And the clay is a mixture of clay that I dig locally. Yep. There's a lot of clay throughout the hills, and also I'm a person that sort of collects clay that other people don't want anymore. So I have 2 or 3 friends that supply me with all their shavings and leftovers, and I recycle it all and use it.
So how many pots can you fit in the kiln once?
Well, it depends on the size of the pots, but generally I'd expect somewhere between about 180 and 200 pots in a firing.
Wow. And you glaze them when you're done with that?
This is a fairly, not a unique process to me, but it's a fairly uncommon process in that, as well as being wood fired, they're actually salt glazed. Okay. So with salt glazing, you bring the kiln up to temperature, which in this case is about 1300 degrees centigrade, and then you put salt into the firebox, coarse swimming pool salt, stock feeders type of salt, and that salt breaks down and the volatilizes under the 1300 degrees centigrade, and the vapors carry through the kiln, and they adhere to the surface of the clay, and they slowly build up a glaze on the clay surface.
So before they go into the kiln, what do you do with all of the pots?
The bowls are thrown on a wheel. Then they're a day or two later, depending on the temperature, the climate, the weather, they are trimmed on the bottom. Yep. Then when I've got a kiln load, I generally bisque fire, so they go into a kiln and they're fired to about 1000 degrees centigrade. Okay. And then I apply a glaze, and because I'm salt glazing the outside, and so the outside is getting a glaze from the salt vapor, I generally only glaze the inside of the bowl, or casserole or teapot. Mostly I allow the effects of the salt and the clay to give me the outside surface.
So what is the most difficult or intricate thing that you make?
Probably teapots are the most complicated, because you're assembling different components to make a whole. The thing that I most enjoy, and is quite complicated, is thrown forms where I expand them and throw them on the wheel without actually touching the outside at all. Okay. And that allows surfaces to develop, texture to develop on the outside, because you're not obliterating them with your hands. Yeah.
So where does your work get displayed?
I have exhibitions occasionally. Okay. I have usually an annual weekend sale here, late in the year. And then I'm also sell at places like the Mundaring Arts Centre, and there's a winery, Mountford Winery in Pemberton. So craft shops and galleries.
So how do you create the detail on the side of your pots?
These bowls are thrown on the wheel quite thick. Yeah. And then when they're leather hard, they've firmed up a little bit, I use a paint scraper or a cutting knife to actually cut what are called facets on the side. And then when I've done the cutting of the facets, I trim the base afterwards. Okay.
And are the square-shaped bowls any harder to make than the round ones?
They involve more stages, and you have to work at the right stage of drying. So I initially throw them a little bit thicker than normal, and then run my fingers up on the inside while they're still wet on the wheel, and roughly make them into a square shape.
Yeah.
Then a day or two later I paddle them with a piece of wood to sort of again try and give a little bit more emphasis to the corners. And then later still I cut. So I actually cut with a cheese slicer or a paint scraper or a cutting wire to actually get the sharper edges. And then when I've done all that over 2 or 3 days, I again turn them upside down and trim the bottoms and try and incorporate some ideas from the sides into the way I do the bases.
Excellent.
They were made, they're about 10 years old, and they were fired in a 5-day long firing in what's called an anagama kiln, which is a wood-fired kiln. So all of the ash on the outside of that pot is from the actual firing, ash landing on it during the firing and melting.
So you're a full-time potter?
I am now. I lectured with TAFE for 25 years, and I've recently finished doing that. So I try to be in the workshop pretty full-time if I can.
Excellent.
Yes.
And you mentioned you're running some workshops overseas as well.
Yes, the last few years I was really lucky to obtain a residency in America at a big clay centre in 2008, and I did a 3-month residency over there. And so I'm also, I've been trying to do some workshops in America and Canada, and tying that in with those trips.
Don't go away, because after the break we'll have more from the Mundaring Open Studios.